Well, I see it's 10:30, so I think we'll get started. Good morning. Welcome to the second day of Virtual Discovery Days. I hope you guys have set in with some good classes so far, and we hope you'll enjoy this one as well. The Water Connects Us All Challenge is presented by an Ag Innovators Experience Grant that we received, Wildcat District received from the Bear Corporation and National 4-H. We'll have several different youth that will be presenting this morning. We'll have a general session here first, and then I've assigned you some breakout rooms. And we'll move into those breakout rooms to get some more information. But in February, we had 3 youth that attended a conference at Iowa State University and received training on this. And they're going to talk to you more about it. And there's going to be some things that we're going to do, and you can watch and see what happens. So Corey, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and let me start my screen.
Hi there, my name's Corey. I'm from Southeast Kansas, and I was one of the lucky 3 that got to go to Iowa and learn about this great challenge and then come back and teach other youth about it. And I'm excited today to teach you. And we're gonna run through the slideshow today to kind of understand together what we're talking about throughout this entire topic. That way, not everybody's in the dark, and that way we can understand some key terms and words.
If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat room, and we'll go back and answer those questions too.
Yep. Okay, so these, as you can see labeled above, are the key messages. They're very important throughout this entire project. Number 1, ecosystems provide a variety of valuable resources and services. This is talking mainly about water and the things that we get from water and the ecosystem that it's found in. Number 2, water connects us all. The main focus of this idea, the idea that everyone uses water and that we're all affected by how water is treated and how water is used. Number 3, human activity has altered the watersheds. This is a true fact, and we're going to be looking at how exactly they've done that in a little bit. And then number 4, engineered practices can improve water quality in both agriculture and communities. This is something we're going to look at a little later on with some models, and we'll dive deeper into number 4 too. This here is ecosystem services. So this is what exactly does this ecosystem provide, and what do ecosystems provide for us, and how do we maintain it? The wheel shows different ways in which we affect it, but also in ways in which it affects us. So this slide is talking about watersheds, and watersheds is one of the main ideas and topics that we need to get out to you and you need to understand. Right now, we're living in the Mississippi watershed. If anybody can guess, it's the giant pink one there with the Mississippi River running through it. It's one of the largest watersheds in the world, and we live in it. It is mainly agricultural, and we do a lot of things with our water in this area, and all of it flows directly to the Mississippi, down to Louisiana, and out to the Gulf of Mexico. So as most of you have probably learned, let it be in elementary school or later on, about the water cycle and how it affects us and how we affect it. The classic water cycle is water rains to the ground. It's collected as groundwater or flows into streams, rivers, ponds, lakes, or oceans. And later it will be evaporated, turned into water condensation, collects in clouds just to rain yet again. And this creates a cycle of water. Something that we don't always touch on, though, is how humans affect this water cycle. And this can be seen through the little orange boxes on the screen. Examples listed are through agricultural purposes, where we use it to water our crops and water our animals. For commercial uses, such as taking a shower, using it as drinking water, or storing water, such as making dams or reservoirs to keep water where you want it instead of it moving where you don't. Another important topic that we need to understand is the nitrogen cycle. And this nitrogen cycle is very important because it's one of the main problems that we're seeing and what we're going to be trying to solve with these engineered practices. As you can see, the nitrogen cycle, like the water cycle, starts in the air where nitrogen, it can't be used. It's called N2, and it can't be used by most plants and animals. Though there are specific plants that can use it, and these plants take the nitrogen from the air and instill it in their roots. Then other plants and other animals can take the nitrogen either from the roots or from the plant itself, and that's how we get nitrogen. The way that it decomposes, yet again, to go back into the air is through a process in which decomposers such as mushrooms and bacteria eat down at the products to the point that it's only left is N2, and it cycles back into the air. This again creates a cycle in which nitrogen is being properly used and is the correct amount of nitrogen for each ecosystem. A problem that we're seeing, though, is too much nitrogen is being used in these ecosystems, and the next slide, I believe, will show you why. This slide shows the amount of nitrogen fertilizers used in an area. As you look around, you can see that the main highlighted area is that Mississippi watershed in which we all live as the state of Kansas. As you look around, there's a lot of yellow, which is moderately okay amount, but there's also a lot of red, and this is because there's a lot of agricultural products and a lot of nitrogen fertilizers and other byproducts of animals and plants that are being used and that are being created throughout this area. And this is a problem because all of those nutrients have to go somewhere, and it just so happens that those nutrients go down through the watershed to the Mississippi River down to the Gulf of Mexico. And this can create a problem. This problem is the dead zone. The dead zone is caused by the over-excessive amount of nitrogen in the water and other harmful pollutants, but also because of so much nitrogen in the water, it gives booms to such plant organisms such as algae, and which can be harmful to other plants and animals because they might not get as much sunlight or they might not get enough oxygen. As you can see, the dead zone is highlighted in a little red right along the coast of Louisiana. This area, nothing can live. You can't live plants. You can't live as a shrimp. Nothing can live there. As you move farther out, you see a yellow area. This area is also very difficult to live in. Not as hard as the red, but it's still very difficult to live in due to the low amounts of oxygen in the water and the high amounts of algae. As you move farther out, you have the green area. Yet again, it's hard to live there, but a little bit easier than the yellow. And finally, you have the regular Gulf of Mexico, which is normal and an unaffected dead zone. What we're trying to do through this teaching topic is we're trying to engineer purposes in which we can reduce the amount of harmful pollutants that flow freely into the Gulf of Mexico, solving a problem that we have caused. If we do this, we can reduce the dead zone, which is the whole point of this topic. And every year that this goes unaffected, it continues to grow larger and larger. Other than engineered purposes, like things that humans make, there are natural ways in which the nitrogen cycle and other harmful pollutants occur and are taken out of water. An example of this would be a wetland, something we're going to do a model of later, in which certain plants and animals are able to take those harmful pollutants and distribute them evenly, making sure that the water isn't completely contaminated and it cuts down on pollution. So with that, I'll hand it over to our wetland model group, and we can understand how wetlands are actually working.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ellen, and this is my sister Jenna. We are from the Lucky Horseshoe 4-H Club, and today we're going to show you the wetland model. Scenario A. It is a spring day. Farmer Smith has tilled and fertilized his field and is ready to plant his crops. Inside the plastic tub, model clay into a hill, sloping downward. There is a stream at the bottom of the hill. Water travels from high to low areas. The water will travel down the hill to the bottom of the container. The bottom of the tub represents a stream where water travels into larger rivers, and in the Mississippi River watershed, some water eventually reaches the Gulf of Mexico. Next, add the soil to the hill to represent soil from a tilled farm field. The soil will end up in the bottom of the tub when it rains. The stream will turn brown because of the soil sediment the water carries. The day after Farmer Smith prepared his field, a storm drops 1 inch of rain in 2 hours on the area. Now she's going to pour the red water on the hill. This represents fertilizer from the field. The water is no longer blue. Dissolved soil travels with the water and into the body of water. Some of the water could end up in the Gulf of Mexico. Now she's going to discard the water. Scenario B. It is a spring day. Farmer Jones has worked with NRCS to reconstruct a wetland near his farm field, and now his field is prepared for planting. Place the sponge at the bottom of the hill inside the plastic tub. The sponge represents a wetland. Using packing tape to hold sponge in place. Next, after that, she is going to add soil to the hill to represent soil from a tilled farm field. The soil will end up in the bottom of the tub. The stream turns brown because of the soil sediment that the water carries. The blue water represents water in the basin of a wetland. The day after Farmer Jones prepared his field, a storm drops 1 inch of rain in 2 hours on the area. With the sponge in place, she's going to pour the red water from the cup over the hill with the soil. The water is absorbed by the sponge. Some water eventually enters the river. Soil travels down the hill with the water. Wetlands are typically located in low areas and are like basins to collect water. The plastic tub represents a basin. Water flows downhill over the terrain of the land, which is the clay. The sponge represents the wetlands that hold water and absorb nutrients. Wetlands are like a sponge. Are there any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Ellen and Jenna? Okay. Okay, so at this point, you guys are going to, you are part of a water management task force. So you're going to be attending this conference to learn about engineered conservation practices. And so we're going to go into some breakout rooms, and I've assigned you breakout rooms. And you're going to, when we come back, I want you to share something new you learned with the whole group about the practice that you set in on. And we'll talk a little bit more about how much those practices cost and how we would implement some of those practices. So let me get you ready to go into the breakout rooms. Make sure I don't have anybody else that needs assigned. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. I'm going to open the room, so all you need to do is to join your room.
Hi there. Welcome to the Rain Garden Activity Room. As I've already said before, my name's Corey, and today I'm going to be teaching you about the engineered practice of rain gardens. This is mostly a urban style of engineering practices that can help cut down on pollutants and other harmful nitrogens, and it is mainly used by cities and urban developments. So this activity would normally have been done in front of you guys in person, but sadly we don't have that ability. So instead I will be acting it out for you and talking about it. So today we have installed a rain garden in our home, and it's directly right off of our gutter spout, just like it should be, about 6 to 12 yards away from it. That day it decides to rain, so we're going to be using these blue magnets as an example of rain. This rain covers everything, the rain garden and the house included, covering the lawn. Rain gardens themselves are about 6-foot deep holes filled with plants and other roots that are normally very deep. The idea behind this is to make sure that water can penetrate the soil and collect in the ground instead of having a runoff that leads directly to a river. Because of this, the water cycle can happen naturally instead of fully running directly into rivers and never being used anywhere else. These 6-foot deep holes, other than filled with roots and long plants, are normally filled with a mesh-like substance. That way, in case if you do have harmful pollutants, they can collect there instead of deep down in the soil, eroding your soil and ruining it. Now that it's rained all over the garden, you are supposed to follow the arrows directed on the garden and the map to see where it would go exactly. Though anything on the lawn is immediately collected in the groundwater bin. So water will flow directly into the groundwater, collecting there where it's not harmful, and it can be used for later use if there's an underground well, or it can be stored for later use in agriculture where it would be saved to be used on farms. Also, anything in the rain garden will flow directly into the groundwater because every hour it consumes 1 to 2 meters of water and infiltrates it down to the ground layer. Anything on a man-made surface then flows like it normally does downhill to a river where it is collected. And this is the natural process in which water will flow throughout this board and in real life. Now say that you are somewhat of a lawn keeper. You like your lawn nice and green, but you're afraid that this drought season, even though there isn't one, will adversely affect it. So you're going to fertilize your lawn. And to use this, we're going to show this as a red dot. These red dots are fertilizers full of nitrogen and other pollutants that can later affect the water quality and later the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. These red dots are spread throughout your lawn to make sure that your lawn looks beautiful, but you never stop to consider what it can affect. The day after you fertilize, it again rains. So to show this, we will again cover every spot with a blue token. There is a trick, however, this time. Because it is raining and it is already saturated, because not only did it rain 2 days ago, but also it is covered in fertilizers that have saturated the ground to the point that they cannot absorb water, and no longer can it go to groundwater. All of this water will need a place to go. So yet again, you will see that the water will cause a runoff. Will flow directly to the river instead of going to the groundwater where it should have been going. But because of this harmful nitrogen, it is now stuck above ground and cannot flow peacefully and quietly to the groundwater. So to show this, you will now follow the arrows marked where it goes. Every piece of water takes along with it its nitrogen found underneath it. This meaning nitrogen is now flowing freely down and into the river, which is completely harmful. Nothing about that is non-harmful. As I've explained earlier, nitrogen, too much of it, can cause deadly things to happen in areas that weren't supposed to receive that much. And as we follow the arrows, we also see that some of the nitrogen gets trapped in the rain garden, which was its purpose. Its purpose was to stop specific pollutants from flowing directly downhill into a river or another catch basin, such as a stream, a lake, or a pond. Because of this, the rain garden has now done its job, collecting water where it should have, making sure that too much water is not escaping. Later, again, as I said, about 1 to 2 meters is consumed every hour and flows directly into groundwater, meaning that all of this water can now flow freely down into the groundwater because of the deep roots found within inside the rain garden. Soon, all that will be left in the rain garden is that nitrogen fertilizer that you used on the other tiles in your lawn. And because of this, the rain garden has done its job. We have trapped the harmful pollutants, we've filtrated the water into the groundwater, and sadly, there is still some nitrogen in the river. The reason we show this as an example is it's mostly for younger kids to let them understand the basics of a rain garden, but rain gardens are very useful and they can be used in multiple different areas. Because of this, it's used in urban settings and it's not that expensive to create. Out of all the 4 engineering practices, this one is the cheapest, costing at most $1,000 because of the materials you'll need to create it and because of the materials that you'll put inside of it. Though it does not catch everything because that would be scientifically impossible. You're always going to miss something. It does do its job, which is what it was created to do. And as the nitrogen and harmful pollutants sit in that rain garden, it will continue to boost the plants inside the rain garden's health, and it will continue to provide your lawn with a healthy living because there will not be too much nitrogen to saturate it. Are there any questions about rain gardens that I could make anything a little bit clearer for you guys? Anything? Okay, if there are no questions, this is just a fair warning as we are going to meet back up. Oh, there is one. Yeah, so the plants in the rain garden do use that nitrogen. They're long-stemmed plants, so they have long stems, but they also have very long roots. And because of this, they're able to store that nitrogen and it won't kill the plants immediately. They can use it correctly and they can cycle through it. These plants can also be found in like a wetland. Sorry about that. I had a problem with my little brother. But yes, the nitrogen that flows and other harmful pollutants will be later used by the plants and things inside your rain garden. And as I mentioned, there's a small mesh material that can also catch some of those pollutants and will sometimes have bacteria that have been specially planted there to create that natural N2 gas and use that as a natural cycle. Great question. Any other questions? Okay. So as we get back together with the rest of the groups, they're going to ask if one of you guys could explain rain gardens to the rest of the group to make sure that you guys have understanding, and that way I don't have to do that much. So thanks guys for listening, and thanks for choosing this as your activity. If you guys have no more questions, I guess we'll just wait for the 15 minutes to be up.
All right. Let me go back and share my screen. Okay, you just came out of your conferences. So let's go to the bioreactors. Who in that group would like to talk about what you learned about bioreactors? Any of you participants that would like to talk about that? Well, this is a quiet group on a rainy Thursday morning. All right, well, Adam or Tucker, do you guys want to talk about the bioreactors then?
I could talk about bioreactors.
Okay, Brooke, go ahead.
Okay, so bioreactors are a filtration system that filters out the fertilizer out of the water so it doesn't contaminate the stream or river. And it contains wood chips that are soaked in chemical that has a chemical reaction which absorbs the fertilizer. It's expensive, but when you think about it, it's just taking the contaminants out of the water so nobody gets sick or something. And without the filtration, the water would remain contaminated.
Very good. Anybody else have anything they want to add about that?
Yeah, I do, Cherry.
Okay, Pam.
Brooke had a great overview of what Adam and Tucker presented in the breakout session. And this slide that we're looking at is really helpful too, because it reminds everyone that it's bacteria in those wood chips that actually do the work of an actual bioreactor. Bacteria convert nitrates, which is the fertilizer, into denitrogen gas, and then that kind of releases it into the atmosphere harmlessly, and then that water goes ahead and flows out after a certain amount of time, and that water that flows out is in a much cleaner state because of the removal of the nitrates. That's it.
Okay, Adam, do you want to talk a little bit about this picture?
Sure. This is basically just a picture of them installing a bioreactor. Bioreactor is actually underground. They're buried. They're about, I think they're 4 to 6 feet deep, 20 foot wide, and about 100 foot long. Pretty much you just dig a pit and line it with plastic and then fill it with the wood chips and then cover it in plastic and cover it in dirt. It's pretty much it. And then it has a control valve or a flow control valve at each end regulating how fast and how much water goes through it.
Does anybody have any questions about a bioreactor? Nope. Okay, we'll go on to the next thing. Oh, this picture here. Tucker, you want to talk a little bit about this picture?
Yes, absolutely. So, this is a few ways on how a bioreactor can work. So, as you see, there's commercial uses here, there's farming uses here, and there's agricultural uses, which is about the same as farming. So, there's cows grazing, which has some fertilizer and manure there. There's urban and commercial waste, which has some harmful chemicals which can pollute the water. There's industrial, along with industrial use. And then there's also septic tanks, which could also put harmful things inside of the water. So as you can see here, so for the septic tanks, they have a wetland and a bioreactor. So for how I'm interpreting that, and almost all of these do, so for what the wetland doesn't catch, it will automatically go through the bioreactor. So then that will really help so that that does not contaminate the water. So that'll get, it'll get most of that. So as you can see, there is a bioreactor here along at each of these waste places and septic tanks. And so that helps with eliminating the pollutants inside of the water. It is a very effective, as Sherry just said in the chat. Although it may be expensive, it will save tons of money in the future because it is helping not only you, not only your neighbor, but the whole United States. And that's what's important.
Yeah, so if you hadn't looked in the chat, B and C wanted to know what the cost was. And as Pam said, those can range from $12,000 to $15,000 to install. They are expensive, but they do remove the most nitrogen and other pollutants coming from your fields or wherever. So stormwater, industries, things like that. So it is a big cost. There are cost share programs available. So thank you guys for that, and I hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, saturated buffer. Who from this group would like to talk about this process?
It works until it doesn't, because the filter gets clogged. From what I heard, isn't it just basically a giant filter that filters all the nitrogen out of?
Right, and so any of you that live in southeast Kansas right now know our soils are saturated. So where does the water go? It has to run off. So what else did we learn about saturated buffers? Shelby or Ellen, Jenna, any of you, either one of you want to pipe in here?
Sure, I will. A saturated buffer is a series of tiles and pipes along the edges of your field. It's medium cost, $8,000 to $10,000 to install, but it definitely, it's medium removal, so it removes a lot, but it doesn't quite get it all. Basically, like this picture shows, it's just a series of pipes and tiles along the edge of a field. Like BNC just said, yeah, a series of types and tiles that just helps filter out the nitrates in the water so that it doesn't go into the stream or ditch or whatever other waterway.
And this picture is just showing them putting in the pipe along the edge of the field so it'll go in through the buffer area. A lot of these practices, the bioreactors and the saturated buffers, we will see a few saturated buffers in the state of Kansas. Bioreactors we don't see as much. In Kansas, we don't use tiling as much in our fields, although it is gaining in some popularity, but we don't use tiling as much in Kansas as they do in Iowa and other Midwestern states. So we don't see the bioreactors as much, but I would think in the future we'll begin to see more and more of that as we move to, help collect pollutants coming off of fields, coming out of industrial parks and things like that. So B&C stated that it's not as expensive as Shelby said, $7,000 to $10,000 usually can get you one of those pretty easy. Okay, bioswales. Who wants to talk about those?
They're like $5,000 to $7,000, so they're not as expensive as the first two.
Okay, where would we see those used at?
On like streets and highways and roadways. It's at the end of streets to catch water.
Right, it could be in the medians as well. Some of our larger cities are starting to put in bioswales in parking lots. Is a good way to catch the runoff coming out of the parking lots. These are they kind of act as a wetland, but at the same time they are something that can filter out salts. They can filter out oil, other pollutants that'll be on the ground. This one is a fairly new one that was constructed somewhere in Ames, Iowa. And you can see that they've directed the water coming off the street to come down into this, and they've planted plants in here that will handle the salt that'll come off from the wintertime runoff and some of those type of things. Joanna, do you have anything you want to add about bioswales?
Sure. I just wanted to add the cost is going to vary from $3,000 to $7,000 depending on size and the type of plant that is used, and also depending on where it is located. Bioswales, they're going to be less expensive when they're near like underground piping.
Okay. Anything else about bioswales that anybody wants to talk about? I think we'll start seeing a lot more of these go in urban settings. All right, the rain gardens. Who wants to talk about rain gardens? Corey, you want to talk about the rain gardens?
Hey, Cherry, Catherine in the chat just said basically rain gardens catch the rainwater, filter the nitrogen out of it. The plants in the rain gardens can recycle it to nitrogen. Also, Corey, you're still muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Corey. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I was talking to myself. It's not the greatest moment of my life. No, Catherine, that was a great point. So rain gardens, they are normally, let's see what B&C says. They do capture nitrogen. And they filter them out through it. They're normally around 6 foot deep holes dug in the ground with natural plants and prairie grasses and other things like that, depending on your specific region and what grows there the best. that have normal deep roots. That way they can penetrate the ground, cutting through the soil and leading down into groundwater. That way when it collects the water, it doesn't just sit inside the rain garden. Slowly but surely, it filtrates down through the ground and into the groundwater. These rain gardens are normally used in urban settings outside of a house, but they can also be used in rural settings outside of your farmhouse, off of a gutter or a downspout. These normally, from gutters to downspouts, they either suggest they be 6 to 12 yards away, or depending on how much you want to collect, you can push them farther away or closer. Here's an example of a rain garden. They're not always just a small little area. They can also be kind of like a bioswale stretched out so that they can collect more and more. Normally, these are the cheapest out of all the 4 engineering practices, costing at most around $1,000 due to the size, the amount of work needed, and because of the plants and other materials that you'll be putting inside to catch nitrogen and other harmful pollutants that you might have added to your lawn through the use of nitrogen fertilizers.
Yeah, so I think this practice in particular is something that we would like to see take hold for people. I mean, this is something you can use in an urban setting, you can use it in a rural setting, just kind of depending on your layout of your land. But, you know, in the urban settings especially, you know, what a way to beautify your lawn and also help reduce pollutants going into our water, because water coming off of your lawns in a city is going to go straight into the storm sewers and stuff. So I think it's very important that we consider doing some things like this. I mean, you could probably do it cheaper than $1,000, but it's a great way to do that. Let's check out this chat.
Like I said, most who is it? C. B and C asked, do rain barrels work too to collect water? Well, yes, rain gardens are used to collect that water so that it doesn't cause flooding, which is an added bonus. That's not their purpose. Their purpose is like the rest of these engineered practices so it doesn't go in the street. Yes, so they do collect water, which is something that's it's a helpful byproduct of what they're actually meant to do. They're really meant to filter out those harmful pollutants. But yes, a rain bucket would work if you want to reduce flooding, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is to keep those harmful pollutants from reaching. There's not harmful pollutants in the rain throughout the process of evaporation. It gets clear of all those. It's natural water. But when you add it to lawns that have been saturated in fertilizers and stuff like that, it becomes polluted. And that's why we use a rain garden or other engineering practices to help filter those out. Did that answer your question, I guess? Okay.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions about that stuff? We're going to, if we would have been meeting face-to-face today, we would have had you guys broke into small groups and you would have been able to do some of this stuff hands-on. And you would have also done a location map and selected the different engineering practices that you felt would have worked best for that. So I hope that you guys kind of got a general feel for some of these engineering practices, what we're trying to do with those. And you can see that the different costs. And I think everybody understands that, if you have more area that needs a high removal of nitrogen, you're going to want to go with the bioreactors if at all possible, because that's going to remove the most nitrates and pollutants. If you're in a situation and if you're just a homeowner at home and you want to try to remove some, chemicals and nitrogen and things like that, you might consider installing a rain garden. So unfortunately, we can't go through all these location maps things today and things like that. But a couple of things before we get off, and Wildcat members, I'd like to ask you to stay on just a few minutes after we get done. I'm trying to take roll call because we're going to send you to your extension office. I'm going to mail the conference packets to you, so you'll have those. So you'll have the hands-on those packets, and along with a couple of other gifts that we had that we were going to share with you in person. So I have a couple of people, and just tell me what county you're from so I can mail them. Lily, I need to know, you can put it in the chat, what county you're from, and Bethany, which county you're from. I think I have everybody else. So I just was trying to make sure I had everybody. You'll receive an email from me a little bit later today with a survey that we would like for you to fill out. Part of our grant was we were to survey our participants. So we would really appreciate if you could fill those out and send them back to us. So let's check the chat one more time. Okay, thank you, Bethany. All right, thanks, Lily. If anybody has any other questions about this has been a great experience. And unfortunately, we're supposed to reach 1,000 kids. So we've kind of been limited with our contact with kids, and we appreciate you guys signing up for this class today.
And BNC, thank you so much for being really engaging today. It was awesome.
BNC, I need to know what county you guys are from too. So I was trying to figure out who you were on my list. All right, thank you, BNC. All right, well, if there's not any other questions, we do appreciate everybody today, and this was recorded, and it will be on the Discovery Days site. So if you want to go back and watch a different breakout room or check out something else, we appreciate it very much. Again, Wildcat kids, stay here for just a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone.